Welcome to this interview, Frédéric. We appreciate your time for this interview for Crónicas de la Diversidad. You have already a lot of interviews about your book, Sodoma. What do you think is the reason why it hasn't been? I think it hasn't been published here in Peru yet.
Honestly, I don't know, but I think it's available in Spanish in Spain. It's available in. I've been in Latin America a bit everywhere when the book was published. So it was there, I think, in every market in Latin America. Peru, I don't know because it's a bit of a different market, but the book is or will be soon, I guess. In any case, it's also possible to get the book in on Kindle or any device or for ebooks. So everywhere you can get a Spanish version.
But what does your research say about the Peruvian Catholic Church? Is it the same story as everywhere else? Is there something remarkable, something that maybe is different here in any way?
First of all, I came to Peru, I think 3 times overall. So it's pretty, I mean, it's a country that where I've been several times. So I think it's important for me to, I mean, it was an important territory. So I'm happy to share with you my view. I mean, I was very interested in Juan Luis Cipriani in Peru, and I did some research on him. I never met him, but I met several activists. I had meetings with Carlos Bruce, that you know. He has been a key influential person in the ministry, the government. And I mean, like everywhere, I think there is a kind of a dichotomy between I would say the country, Peru, that is going to more freedom, more liberty. The gay life is, I would say, better than what it was, I mean, decades ago. And so there is this trend. And in front of that movement, you have the Catholic Church that seems going in the other directions. So whenever the society is opening, the Catholic Church is basically reducing the freedom and being more homophobic. And I think to understand that, it's the fact that homophobia is still very strong, and the Catholic Church use homophobia and use sometimes the homophobia of the people to try, even if it's a failure, to try to stop the, let's say, liberalization of sexuality.
What did you find specifically on the Peruvian priests here?
You know, my study is a study, first of all, it's a qualitative study, so it's based on interviews, long interviews. And second of all, I work mainly, even in Rome, mainly on the apparatus. So the cardinals, the bishops, the episcopal conferences. So I'm not very good, to be honest, to describe the situation on the priest level, because first of all, there are so many, and also much more open quite often than the hierarchy. You need to understand that the Catholic Church is a top-down organization. So everything is decided by the top level, either the Vatican or the Episcopal Conference. And the priests on the ground level, the basic priests, even though they can be open and much more friendly, even though also you have priests that are very homophobic, they can do that only in private, because the system doesn't allow them to be open. especially in a country like Peru, where the hierarchy is extremely homophobic, and the priest, I mean, we have studies from from Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, that on the local base, priests are much more open to everything. I mean, a lot of priests are married, maybe not formally, but they live with a girlfriend. Sometimes they are even married by another priest. A lot of priests on the base, on the ground level, have a sexuality. They have girlfriends. They have a normal life as a husband, I would say. Sometimes, quite often, they have kids, but all that is kept a bit secret. And of course, it's the hierarchy doesn't recognize that. And the hierarchy, of course, like everywhere, is very gay. So you have like the local rural priests that are very straight and living a normal sexual life. And on the top level, the hierarchy is very gay and also living a sexual life. So that's the paradox and to some extent the hypocrisy of the system.
We are talking about abuse in the whole history of the Catholic Church, and what can the world or what can countries, other states do about it? Is there anything that can change? Not maybe the Catholic Church system, but the Catholic Church as an institution, because we're talking about crimes.
Yes, but what I was saying before was mainly discussing the sexuality of priests. And for me, since I'm not Catholic and I'm actually not even a believer, I would say I don't care as a lay person about what the Bible or the episcopate or the Vatican decide. What is interesting for me, it's what is allowed by law. And if a priest has a girlfriend or has a boyfriend, if they are adult, if they are with consent, if there is no, of course, violence, rape, or if it's shared, they accept that. And if there is no hierarchy as well, because if you have a hierarchy between, let's say, a seminarian and a priest, or a priest and a bishops, then there is problem. But if there is no such a thing, then I don't have any problem with the priest being gay or straight and having sexuality. I think it should be allowed. I think that's the normality. And that's actually what's happening in Peru. The vast majority of the priests have a sexuality, they have lovers, and I'm happy for them. I don't have any trouble about that. However, if we are discussing having sexual relations with underage kids, either boys or girls, or if there is hierarchy between the sexual, I would say, victims and the adult, for example, again, like a seminarian and a priest, then of course that's a problem. But that's not a problem because of the church. That's a problem because of the law. And that the only things that count in a country, whatever the Bible or the church says, we, as a state, we don't care. What we care, it's about what the state is saying. And then it's illegal to have a sexuality with an underage, especially if it's less than 15 years old kid. I mean, I speak about European law. I don't know exactly the law in Peru, but I think it's pretty close. And then I would say it's not. We cannot defend that. I just want to add that at the same time, I don't think there is any link with homosexuality by itself. And so the problem is not homosexuality. The problem for these abuses that are extremely important everywhere. Basically, we know the story in Mexico, in Colombia, in Chile. There is a big scandals in in Brazil, but also in Cuba, in Venezuela, in the US, in Europe, everywhere, in Australia, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and so on and so forth. It's about thousands of priests that have raped or abused kids. So I don't think there is a link with homosexuality by itself. First of all, because sexual abuse are mainly straight in the world as a majority, large majority. Why? Because there is much more straight people in the world than homosexual. And so basically sexual abuse are mainly by men to women, and the victims are in a very high level percentage women or girls. However, in the Catholic Church, there is a singularity that shows that 80 to 85% of the victims of the priest are boys or young men. So the question is, why is that? And the answer, again, is not about homosexuality. It's about a sexuality that is repressed. It's about sexuality that is not allowed, that is not accepted. And because of this constraint, because sometimes they cannot have a normal life as straight or as gay, they use, quote unquote, they abuse kids, also migrants, or also prostitutes, or also seminarians. So people that are supposed or were supposed not to speak. And that's, I think, the problem is not homosexuality. The problem is the lie about sexuality, and even more, the culture of secrecy that allowed this lie to be protected by cardinals and the hierarchy.
Do you think that maybe this particular situation we're living in the world right now, this COVID-19 pandemic, what kind of impact do you think it may have on people's way of living their sexuality, even in the Catholic Church? Is there any change in sight in any way, in the way we are approaching sexuality, the way we socialize with sexuality around the world?
Honestly, I cannot really answer your question. First of all, because my research and my book were before this pandemic. And second of all, because actually what the pandemic creates, it's that by definition, a social distanciation, and the fact that the church are basically not open, even for kids. So, I mean, that's pure hypothesis because I didn't work on that, but I would say there is probably less sexual abuse right now in the church, except maybe in the system of the congregation, I mean, where the priest and seminarian live together. But the debate for me is not honestly about now or 2 weeks ago or in 1 month. It's not about Cardinal A or Bishop B or Priest C. It's about a system. It's about a system that created a big lie about the sexuality of the priest, that is asking a priest to be chaste is profoundly counter-natural. It's against the nature. And this is why it doesn't work. And it won't work, never. So you can still lie, you can still say, oh, they are going to be chaste, but either they are not going to be, or they are going to be sick, unhappy, and which at the end will be one of the reasons of sometimes, not always, for thanks about sexual abuse. And so I think the problem is the system by itself, I would say by its structure. And I don't see any solution of the sexual abuse crisis, even in Peru, without allowing priests to be married, priests to have kids, priests to be able to be different in their sexuality approach, and also to have women becoming priests, and at the end, men that are gay to be allowed to be priests.
It's a matter of freedom. It's a matter of less repression.
Yes, I mean, I'm not against chastity by itself. I mean, and in a way, I would say I'm a liberal. People can be able to do whatever they want. If you are a priest and you don't want to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you're happy to be chaste, why not? I mean, that's your right. But I interview actually hundreds and thousands of priests, and the vast majority of them, they would like to have a girlfriend or to be gay openly, or at least to have boyfriends. So the reality is that they lie, and they lie everywhere. I mean, I've been in Peru several times, and the priests in Peru, like everywhere, they have girlfriends and they have boyfriends and they have a sexuality. And to be honest, I just prefer a priest to be gay and to have a boyfriend than to rape or to abuse a kid of 10 years old. That's as simple as that. And all the people that believe in chastity and that want to impose chastity are today responsible of the sexual abuse crisis.
Well,
but the crisis of the church on sexual abuse, it's much more deep and longer than the coronavirus crisis.
In asking you this question about the COVID-19 and its impact, what do you think about it, the impact that it could have on the LGBTQ in the world? Do you think that the internet is going to have a very specific role in maybe a new way of connecting everybody, or letting people and culture express themselves in a different way?
Again, I wrote another book that is published in Peru. The book is called Global Gay. And yeah. I already explained and mentioned, based on a long field work in more than 50 countries, that the internet is changing the gay life. You don't need to go to a club in a country where things might be dangerous, or when you live in a rural area, or when you are too young or too old to go to clubs. You feel too old or you feel too young. You can go to apps and website, and the digital gay life is incredibly active and new. I think this crisis has to some extent exaggerate and duplicate that a lot, even though we are not supposedly to meet right now, but some maybe try to do that to some extent, but when the crisis will be more quiet and less important, of course we will be back to a normal situation, and then probably the digitalization will be still even more important, because that's to some extent that's really the future. However, I feel, and I still believe that you don't live with your boyfriend on the internet. You need to have your boyfriend with you, and so it's like theater and the dance, and also work. You can work at home. You can also watch some concerts, live music at home on your computer. But there is one day when you want to go out. You want to meet the people. You want to see the artist. You want to be in a conference with a speaker. You want to be in a gay club to feel the community sense of that. And even though the gay life is very digital now, and I think it's a great news, and I'm totally in favor of that, I also think we will need a gay pride, and we will need a gay parade, gay clubs, gay life to be able to meet. And because life is not just online, it's also in person.
So what's your take on the protests around the world about protesting the quarantine?
No, in fact, of course, there is some people, even in France, that can be unhappy. There is also people that try to react a bit, and and also sometimes some dance in the street or whatever. But I'm very surprised how, in fact, there is nobody protesting seriously the quarantine. I mean, I haven't done a study on that, but if I see what's happening in France, all the political party, even the more affected by the quarantine, like cafe, restaurants, are not basically against it. And even if you are against it, I mean, people are not going right now to go back to a cafe altogether. So I think there is not such a thing, because the quarantine is not against you, it's not against people, it's to protect the people. I mean, and also to protect our fathers and grandparents. And last night I had a friend of mine who died by the virus.
I'm sorry.
He was not very young, but he was still not so old. And so why, we don't know exactly what did happen. I mean, that's a bit mysterious, because he was not sick for anything else. Again, he was not young, but he lived around the corner. And so we protect for ourselves, and also for the people that are older than us. And so I think the gay people are part of the gay world, but also to the general world. And so they are not out. I mean, the virus is not going to be in favor of gay people. And we suffered enough during the AIDS epidemics not to make the same mistake today. So I don't see any movement of refusing, at least now. Of course, it will be a different story if it's the quarantine will be for months ahead. But in France, we are supposed to stop the main quarantine on May 11th, so in 2 weeks. So we are going to survive until then.
I also wanted to ask you about, what do you think, well, maybe here in Peru, there are not so many gay people or LGBTQ people living right now in quarantine with their boyfriends or girlfriends. Maybe they are alone, or maybe they are, a lot of them actually, living with their families. It's interesting, maybe, what do you think about that impact of being either alone or with just your family, but maybe having a boyfriend that is far from you and also in quarantine? And
So I would say there is a two way of looking at that. I mean, the bad way will be to see that, as far as I know, we have some problems with gay people, especially young one in the family, and even the government in France try to create some shelter to help in some extreme cases, but they do exist when the people are in very big trouble because of the quarantine, being with their parents when their parents don't allow them to be gay, some real trouble. So in this way, I think some public policy or by the organization or association are important. On the other hand, I think the gay people are like everywhere, everybody else. I mean, if you're in love and your lover is not with you, either you're straight or gay, that's bad. That's not worse being straight or being gay. In the same way, if you have bad relation with your parents, either you're gay or straight, your relations were bad with your parents. And there is many reasons why you can have bad relations with your parents, not just your sexuality. It can be linked to the music you listen, the fact that you sleep late in the morning, you don't want to eat what they suggest, you live in a too small apartments, and many other reasons. So I'm a typical what we call universal person, in a sense that I don't want to. I mean, there is singularities being gay. This is why I did some books about this issue, but I don't think you can explain everything because the people are gay. There are also many reasons why they might be in trouble just because they are human persons.
The last question, and returning a bit to your book Sodoma, what do you think is the biggest impact it has had since it was published?
You know, I think I would say if I would like to summarize the book impact, I mean, I can focus on the fact that the book was published in more than 20 languages, that we were bestsellers in the New York Times bestsellers in the US and a bestseller in 15 countries and so on and so forth. But the main things is not about the book and about sales or whatever. It's mainly about the fact that I would say when you write a book like that, people know the book exists. So they know, the cardinal, the bishops, and the priest, they know that we know. They know that we have understood. They can still lie, and they will, but people know. And the debate is not about my book. I mean, my book, I did it, it's published. In a way, it's not even my book anymore. The book is in the public domain and people can read it online, on Kindle or whatever. The reality is that the system cannot survive now, because we are in 2020, and in 2020 there is camera, there is microphone, there is priest that speak, victim that speak, press that write. And so even in Peru, in a pretty, I would say, I mean, a bit conservative country to some extent, even there is a freedom on the internet that shows that things are public. And I would say that's it. They can still lie, but you know, the real people that care about the church are people like me, even though I'm not a Catholic. I care about the church because I don't want them to be for the next decades and other decades and decades with new scandals every month, every week, with new cases, because the system is in itself fake. And the lie is at the core of the system. And so I would say in the history, people will believe probably that are much more in favor of the Catholic people in Peru than Cardinal Cipriani. I will have done more good things for the church than him, because I've said the truth, and now people can try to change the system. Otherwise, they are not going to survive.
Yeah.
You know, another word, in France, we have 800 priests that die every year. 800. Especially now, in these coming months, much more priests are dying because of coronavirus. But in general, 800 die. We have less than 60 that are ordained. So it means in 10 years, there is no priest in France at all. And that's the same in Spain, that's the same in Italy, that's the same in the US, in UK. Priests are disappearing. And so if you want to have priests, you need to change the system to allow them to live a normal life, which means having lovers, having kids, having a wife. And that's, I think, the way it's going to work.
I want to just thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you so very much for the time. Thank you for accepting this interview.